So there's this man, he has a time machine. Up and down history he goes, zip, 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 getting into scrapes. Another thing he has is a passion for the works of Ludwig van Beethoven. And one day he thinks, what's the point of having a time machine if you don't get to meet your heroes? So, off he goes to 18th century Germany. But he can't find Beethoven anywhere. No one's heard of him. Not even his family have any idea who the time traveler is talking about. Beethoven, literally, doesn't exist. This didn't happen, by the way. I've met Beethoven. Nice chap. Very intense. Loved an arm wrestle. No, this is called the bootstrap paradox. Google it. The time traveler panics. He can't bear the thought of a world without the music of Beethoven. Luckily, he brought all of his Beethoven sheet music for Ludwig to sign. So he copies out all the concertos and the symphonies, and he gets them published. He becomes Beethoven. And history continues with barely a feather ruffled.
The term bootstrap paradox was first coined by the great science fiction writer Robert A. Heinlein in his 1941 book, By His Bootstraps, which shows the time travel paradoxes encountered by the protagonist, Bob Wilson, through his use of a time portal. This cosmological paradox, as suggested by the previously shown Doctor Who excerpt, establishes a scenario in which a time traveler goes back in time to the era in which some major development with which he is familiar takes place, discovers the original inventor to be non-existent, catalyzes the development himself based upon his knowledge of said development, continuing history in its course. Which begs the question, who created it to begin with? The situation clearly presents a rather large pickle for us, as there obviously has to be someone who initiated the development for our time traveler to be able to learn of it. Although the scenario suggests that the time traveler themselves was the creator, how could they be the creator without doing any of the work? With what we know about the way in which events unfold, the work had to be done at some point in the timeline to create whatever it was that the time traveler was interested in. If the creation already existed, and the creator brought some published form of it back in time only to discover that the creator he believed to exist in fact never existed, what is it that created the works and identity of the non-existent creator in the first place? The problem with this scenario is the fact that there is no logical justification for the existence of the creation or the identity of its creator as prerequisites to the time traveler's reality. Now, few self-respecting nerds can reject the awesome power and sacred status of the works of Robert Heinlein, as well as the classic quirkiness of Doctor Who. And since we have an idea on how the paradox works, we now have to find a resolution. The best way to resolve this paradox is to hypothetically play out a scenario where time travel is possible. We must ask how time travel would function if it were real. There are thousands of different interpretations of how time travel could work. Say what? But because the method is less important than the results, let's sum it up to 3 different types. 1, where time is changeable. You can go back and change events that you know for sure happened. 2, where time is fixed. Time only happens once. You can go back and do what you wish, but you cannot change what happened. 3, time is breakable. You can change time, but you can't affect it. History generally stays the same. There are no fundamental changes that can be made to its course without breaking the space-time continuum. That's right. No saving your father from getting hit by a car and causing your mother to fall for you instead. No major changes, only time loops. That is why, to resolve this conundrum, we will use the third aforementioned type of time travel. Under this type of time travel, a stable, infinite time loop can be created provided it occurs after time has run its course through an event for the first time. There has to be an initial cause. In this case, the time traveler would have to have had a desire to go back and become a musician in a world where Beethoven never was. For example, maybe he was a Mozart fan in the first instance of time. The traveler would have to write the music for the first time. This ultimately leads to the time traveler admiring the works of his future, or past self, and deciding to come back in time, after which point the time traveler will respond according to what they discover about the time they've traveled to, reacting to ensure that their event will occur and not pass out of existence, setting their now future, or maybe past, I don't know, selves up to admire the music, causing them to travel back in time to discover that the creator they believe to exist actually does not, and repeat the cycle again, and 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 basically a lot of times. Bootstrap paradoxes could also conceivably happen under unchangeable time travel. In fact, any act of unchangeable time travel will create a time loop, meaning that every trip to the past already happened. For the bootstrap paradox to work in this scenario, it must have been destined. Time will have always had the paradox, and the paradox creates itself. A time traveler can't create a bootstrap paradox, but he can find one that he is already a part of. Once he found where he will have been, he learns where he will eventually go to the past to live out the remainder of his life, for himself to be born years later, to find out where he will have been, to find out where he will go, to find out... But the problem with this one is that it still doesn't explain the origin of the event in the first place. The only way the creation would exist would be through some divine intervention, or if it was woven into the fabric of space somehow, which for whatever reason seems unlikely. Ultimately, the most likely solution seemed to be that either the time traveler initially traveled back in time because of their own interest and literally became the first Beethoven, setting themselves up to connect with their own music when born in the future, causing them to travel back, repeating the cycle but confirming that they were in fact the composer, or Beethoven was the original composer but was eliminated in some calamity involving the time traveler who came back to see him, causing the traveler to take his place by publishing Beethoven's works, continuing the cycle when his now future self discovers Beethoven's music, but definitively leaving Beethoven as the creator. Either solution is arguably more likely than the existence of Beethoven's music within the fabric of space. All in all, this is a delightfully confusing paradox, and by no means are our explanations the most adequate, and certainly not the only ones out there. So please, like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell, and be on the lookout for time loops. Nom 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 nom.